Today, in the next hour, I'll cover what we as business leaders are doing in terms of sustainability and ESG, but more importantly is what we are doing in terms, in light of helping our clients also absorb this phenomenon that is becoming global. And it is becoming global because, things are happening outside our window. The environment changing, not only the physical environment, but also the economic and business environment is changing. And we obviously need to adapt to that. Now, it's nothing new, by the way. It is something that has been around for some time. So why is there a need suddenly to, act now? Why is today so different than what it used to be 2, 3, 5, and I would even say 10 years ago when the whole CSR came about? The concern with the environment is not new, but I think there are other elements that have expanded within those last few years. So what is different today? There are a number of things. First of all, the environment has expanded. Let me just expand on that. So ESG is not just being sustainable or being environmentally friendly. ESG takes a much broader look at how we as businesses and as society function. So there is obviously the environmental aspect, but also there are the two new aspects, which are the social and the governance aspect. Social means the ethical, means how we behave versus our employees and our people. And governance is how we actually behave in a societal element in terms of ethics, in terms of proper way of doing things. With this ESG has not born on itself. It is obviously coming in with EU or increasing EU regulations. So it is under heavy, let's say, governmental push. And therefore, it is forcing us to act upon these new measures. There is, again, it's not just EU. You're seeing a number of big European or even global organizations tying themselves up. So UN has established in 2005 the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And they are all tied up with ensuring that we as a planet or as a society function fairly and efficiently. So I think these big pushes, not just by what we should be doing, but also by the governing laws of either the EU or the UN, are putting new, or are creating, I should say, new corporate priorities. And therefore, today, it is different than what it used to be 5 or 10 years ago, where it was, let's call it voluntary for companies to do A or to do B. Today, it's a mandate. Companies need to actually act on these regulations. And you can see it slowly in the last 1 or 2 years. You've seen a big push, or you've been seeing a big migration towards companies publicly announcing their CO2 goals, becoming net zero by whether it's the automotive business needing to be carbon neutral by 2035, or big companies actually putting dates to their carbon neutrality. So this is happening, and it's happening publicly. So again, it's a major shift from where we were a few years ago. And I think it's also due to, whether it's science, whether it's media, whether it's data, it's also due to an acceleration of negative trends. And what I mean by that, we have more data. We have data that travels much faster across our borders. And we have, their new reality is we know that the CO2 is becoming a major issue on our environment, and we see it every day with our climates. We know that, sort of the microbiomes and the microplastics are infiltrating our food chain, whether it's from the seas or from the land. We know this is an issue. we know we have, well, we will have, and some countries and some regions have already a major problem with lack of water or lack of drinking water. So these problems that were present, they're not new, that were present 5 or 10 or 15 years ago, have now really become sort of center stage. So it is different today. Governments are taking a step forward, and not just by saying and recommending companies, but by actually putting rules and regulations where companies need to follow and abide by. And that is a big, big change versus 5 or 10 years ago, where it was purely, as I said, voluntary. So what does that mean in terms of oh, let me just, okay. So sustainability and the broader context has become or must become a part of business strategy. We have no way of escaping, sort of our surroundings. And if you, let's say, simplify all these external pressures, it really comes down to four things. And I think as I spoke, on my slide earlier, we live in an environment or in a business environment where there are increasing regulations. Companies need to follow some rules. And therefore, we must, let's say, change the way we function or we work. This is unfortunately the new reality, I should say. I think more importantly, in our domain is what I call the supply chain impact or the supply chain domino. And what I mean by that is every single company, whether it be Business Lease or yourselves, are part of a bigger chain. You have customers and you have suppliers. And sooner or later, either your customers or your suppliers will come back to you and will ask you, what are you doing, in terms of ESG? What are you doing in terms of recyclability, circular economy? What are you doing in terms of your ethical stance on whether it's corruption or whether it's, sort of inappropriate, let's say, business dealings? They will turn around and say, what are your internal policies in terms of, sort of procedures, making sure, whether it's privacy data or so forth. So what I mean to say is that sooner or later, whether you want it or not, it's going to come from your customers or your suppliers. And I've got a perfect example where today we are, as Business Lease, we are seeing this coming more and more, where our customers are reverting back to us and saying, Business Lease, what are your sustainability goals? What are your ESG metrics? So we cannot, even if we don't want to do it, we cannot escape if we want to maintain good business, sort of be in business. So as I said, the supply chain, whether from your customers or from your suppliers, will put pressure on you to act. And I think a big act or a big push in this is also from an investor's or public pressure. And from an investor point of view, think of it from banks or from your sort of your shareholders. They are more and more critical upon how and what the companies are doing. A perfect example is banks are the prime sort of are at the front of the, let's say, of the pack in terms of pushing companies, requiring them to act more diligently in terms of their environment, social, and governance. And they're doing this in a very, very simple way, by controlling the cost of money. So therefore, ironically, I was at a presentation last week from one of the major banks here in the Czech Republic, and they said they had an internal mandate of their full portfolio by 2050 being carbon neutral. And what that really means in terms of us is that banks will scrutinize the businesses when they want to take loans or when they want to borrow money, meaning they will give preferential rates to greener or more sustainable businesses, that do take care of you know, sort of the environment, that do take care of their ESG metrics. And they will become much more expensive for companies that really don't do anything. So you see the pressure is, this is exactly part of the supply chain, because we, unfortunately, need money to, you know, sort of function forward. And lastly, I think it is just creeping in today, but your brand reputation. You, sorry, can you put on mute? Your brand reputation, you're seeing sort of an increasing public pressure, and, you know, sort of consumers becoming a lot more critical upon how businesses and more brands are acting in terms of their environmental responsibility. So today, I would say it's not yet a major push, but in, you know, when everybody goes ahead, it will become one of those normal things to evaluate brands or companies on their environmental stance or environmental activities. So, you know, these four, I call them basic forces, but they are extremely powerful forces where it's forcing all the businesses, whether they want or not, to start acting. So, you know, in a way, what can we do? What are the options to reduce the CO2 with the existing fleet? So obviously, this is a little bit closer to home. I'm really looking at, from a CO2 perspective, you have scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Or I'm sure you've heard of this terminology. Scope 1 is really the CO2 emissions that you as a company, or we as a companies, have indirect control, and very often those are the your fleet, your cars, and if you produce anything, you know, if you produce electricity or if you produce energy, and what CO2 is exerted out of that production. But in our terms, it really means sort of our fleets, our car fleets. So, you know, very looking at the realistic approach on what companies can do today on decreasing this CO2 is really have a fleet migration. And today I'm assuming that 99.999% of all the companies are still on, you know, sort of internal combustion engines, meaning, you know, whether it's a fuel car or a diesel car. So yes, obviously a solution is to start migrating your fleet into cleaner options, whether it's plug-in hybrids or fully electrical cars. You could also alternatively, you know, say to yourself, well, you know, we need to reduce our CO2, so therefore we could potentially reduce our fleet or the use of our fleet. Not always very practical, but that is an option. And lastly, as you're reducing, you need to also potentially find alternative modes of transportation, whether you tell your employees or you tell sort of your salespeople, you know, if you go from A to B, start looking at alternative modes of transportation, whether it's the train, public transport, buses, bicycles in some places. But I think you understand where I'm going with this. It really is analyzing your today's use of your fleet. Now, these are just a few options. The biggest problem is, are they realistic? And I think to be, you know, pragmatic on this solution is, we have, you know, all these solutions are not a quick fix element. We can't just migrate our fleet overnight. There is a huge cost implications on taking 10, 50, 100 cars and, you know, switching them over to fully electrical cars. You know, not only is it just the cost element, but the time element, because of the infrastructure and because of the necessary surrounding supporting elements to function within an electrical vehicle. So huge costs, very timely to migrate. And obviously all this, you know, whether we want to reduce, change our fleet, use alternative transportation, it creates a huge operational inefficiency. So it's, I mean, companies today are challenged to see what are, how do they address their CO2 in a very quick and effective manner without, impacting their operational efficiency. However, Business Lease, being in the mobility business, we came up with a let's say a proposal or a service called GoBetter. And very simplistically, GoBetter is a program that allows clients to decrease and offset their fleet's carbon emission while also increasing the health and safety of their drivers. So is it too good to be true? No, actually, it's all possible. And I'll show you how it's possible. But more importantly, why is this necessary? So by decreasing and doing sort of proactively doing good, not only for the environment, but also for the health and safety of your employees, it's you gain both internal benefits as a company, as employee morale, but also there are external benefits in terms of how you project your company onto the market. As I just mentioned it, internal benefits, improved employee morale. And it's becoming more and more important to actually show your employees that you as a company are socially responsible. And by doing little acts, we're not gonna, one company is not gonna revolutionize or, save the planet, but 1 + 1 + 1 will. It is the collective, let's say, efforts of every single company that do start making a difference. And we see this. It's, we know that companies that are actively supporting, sustainable activities, the employees are much more happier, they're much more engaged, they are, they feel good that they're working for a company that is socially responsible. Let's not negate the fact that in a way you're also risk managing and what I call future-proofing your business operations. If you remember one of the very first slides, the full supply chain domino effect, and this is exactly it. Sooner or later, for you to retain or to remain in business, this will be a mandate. It will be a strict must-have, because either your suppliers or your consumers or your clients will actually demand it from you. So therefore, you're ensuring that you have a future for and sustainable future for tomorrow. And I think as any responsible company, you are fostering a corporate culture or generally a culture of environment responsibility. It is programmed into the employees and basically they act accordingly. Now, there are obviously external benefits. The social, the positive social impact, whatever you do and however you act is basically perceivable and very visible to the outside world. You do have, do not negate, every single step does have a positive impact on the climate. Whether you have 5 cars, 50 or 100 cars, it adds up very, very quickly. 5, 10, 100 tons of CO2 does, add up. I think, as I said, back to the future-proofing of your business operation, it does attract, customers. It does attract and sustain suppliers as well. You build much better foundation from a business point of view as well. More and more regulations are coming in. You're complying with those regulations because, again, that's going to be an external factor that you need to take care of. And while you're building sort of a positive brand image and a positive brand reputation. And lastly, but not least, improved relationship with stakeholders. And I mean, 360% stakeholders, whether it's financial institutions, whether it's stakeholders or, so association groups or whatever that may be, customers, suppliers, clients, associates, partners, agency, everything. So I think it just creates a positive, let's say, effect, or a domino effect. So what is actually GoBetter in very, very simple terms? GoBetter is, it's split into three things. One is measure. Obviously, to do anything, we need to understand where we're starting from, a ground zero, if you will. So we need to understand where, what is our fleet emission today. So we measure where we are, or how much CO2 we produce. Then we move into reducing. So we activate a few programs in order to reduce our CO2 consumption or emissions. And these, I'll go into the detail on how we can help on reducing these. And third is offset. Obviously, we cannot, you can reduce by so much. And then in order to become carbon neutral, you offset the difference. So you measure, you activate some activities to reduce, and then whatever is left over, you offset in order to be fully carbon neutral. So what does that really mean in terms of tangible things? So we, because we operate most people's or most companies' fleets, we have full overview of the fleet's data. So we are able to actually analyze, the fleet and its CO2 emission. And out of that analysis, or the data analysis, we're able to provide what we call a dashboard, the GoBetter dashboard, and understanding sort of your emissions over the year, over your full lease term, and the various activities. Once you engage in the various activities, meaning step 2, we're able to actually calculate how much CO2 you can decrease and eventually offset. So this measure not only gives you a picture of today, but is also able to estimate a picture of tomorrow once you activate these steps. You move into reduce. Obviously, you need to bring down your level of CO2 by a factor of X. And here we have two tools to help us, or to help you. One is what we call a Safe Drive pod. And it's a small pod that is a non-GPS telematics. I say telematics and everybody thinks GPS tracking. No, this is a unique pod that just registered the driving behavior of the car or of the driver without any GPS location data. It's quite unique in the market. And more importantly, I'll go into the specifics a little bit later. It gives you a rating of how well you've driven, on every trip you do. Secondly, part of the reduce activity is driving training. Yes, I know we all expert drivers. We've had our driving license for 5, 10, 15, maybe even more than 20 years. But we've over those years, we've created, let's call them bad habits. And it's interesting to go back a little bit and understand some fundamentals of driving more efficiently. And efficiently also means economically, because your fuel consumption is directly related to your CO2 output. The more you consume, the more the car emits CO2. So therefore, by driving more efficiently, you drive more economically, and more importantly, you reduce your CO2 emissions as well. So there are even additional benefits to being more sustainable. And I'll get into what we do and some of the metrics there. And lastly, as I said, what we do is measure, we reduce by as much as possible, and then we offset the rest of the carbons to actually achieve carbon neutrality, if that is what we wish. We've got, so you can imagine, because of the various measurements, the reductions and carbon offsets, we have a mix and match of options for our clients, and we've packaged them into 3 different slots. We call them GoBetter Live, GoBetter Plus, and GoBetter Ultra. And as you'll see, it's always a combination of these 3 factors. So GoBetter Live is always, the full fleet scan. We need to understand where we are. We need to understand, our ground zero. What is our emissions today? It is then we combine that with the real-time telematics, the Safe Drive Pod, and then should you also wish to become carbon neutral, we can offset the rest. GoBetter Plus is slightly differently, but fundamentally the same. Again, full fleet scan, but here we have the the driver training to really instill or to educate, if you want, how to properly drive more economically, not slower, but more economically. And eventually sort of, carbon offset as well. And lastly, sort of the Rolls Royce, if you will, the GoBetter Ultra. It is a combination of both the telematics, but also the driver training, and obviously the carbon offset. So, how does this in detail? Now you understand sort of the rough idea behind, the GoBetter program, the measure, the reduce, and the offset. Let me just spend a few minutes on each element to go a little bit more into detail to understand sort of the fundamentals of the fundamental elements that drive each activity. As I said, the measure is critical. And the measure is critical, and it's all based on data. So what we do, because we have all the data in terms of, the car fleet overview, we analyze the powertrains. We look at the number of kilometers or the number of cars you have. We have a specific data for each individual car in terms of CO2, in terms of consumption. And we do a full, let's say, the algorithm, if you will, does a full analysis in the background of what the emission of that, not only the individual car, but as a combination of the company or of the total fleet. And out of that, we create a sort of a report where you have all this data visually, let's say, presented, whether it's the number of cars, whether it's the combination of your models, the diesels versus the fuel cars. It's what is the expected sort of CO2 output over the life of the lease? What is the expected CO2 of the over the year based on the kilometers? So you see there are multiple, and it's an ever-changing. This is a sort of a beast which is alive, because obviously CO2 is directly related with the number of kilometers you do. And as I said, the more kilometers, the more emissions you have. So once we have this sort of, as I call it, ground zero, we know exactly what is our emissions at the starting point. And we can estimate going forward as well with the activities that we put forth, how much we will reduce. So once we measure, then we start going into the reduce element. And as I said, the reduce element is in 2 possible options. One is the real-time driving behavior, and this is the Safe Drive Pod. It gives you a score after every single trip, whether the trip is a 2-minute jump from here to the local supermarket or a 3-hour drive across the country. Every time you get scored or on the specific trip. And believe it or not, we humans like, a challenge. And when we quantify something, we always want to improve it. And this is the beauty of this rather simple, let's say, idea, but extremely powerful, that we look at our score after every trip, and then we actually say to ourselves, we can do better. But that little, let's say, mental trick gives us the benefit of, sort of hidden benefits of 1, lowering our consumption, 2, because of better driving, and 3, reducing our CO2 emissions. Lastly, once you have data or you quantify everything, there you have a personal report of how you've been improving, hopefully. But also a very powerful element is you can have a combined dashboard with all the other drivers in the fleet. So you get this, let's say, comparative scoring among the other drivers in the fleet. And I'll go into that a little bit later. Sorry, I forgot to say, again, a very important thing, because we've seen that it's quite prevalent in all of the drivers. There is no GPS tracking. That means it's 100% private. That means that the company or the administrator has no visibility whatsoever on the location of the drivers, which is quite important from a privacy point of view. The second element, as I said, is coaching to improve driving skills. It's combining theory with practice. So we do 2 to 3 hours, a theoretical, let's say, educational session, understanding some fundamentals behind, the cars. But more importantly, cars have also improved over the last few years, understanding how they function and really gaining all the benefits of all these modern technologies. Then we have a one-to-one with a driving coach, putting the theory into practice with our bad habits as well, but really trying to see our habits with a new theory, how we can, become better drivers. And you actually, with the real life coaching, you do get real-time feedback on what you should, and most importantly, what you shouldn't be doing. So if I can go back to Safe Drive Pod, as I said, it's a combination of a hardware, a little pod that you actually put in the car. You have an app on your phone which collects all the data on the driving behavior of the data. And then there is a dashboard primarily for the administrator to actually overview or oversee the full fleet of the cars. So how does it work? It really is super simple. This little pod is stuck on the front in your car, behind your main mirror. It really is self-adhesive sticker tape. You just, within literally 3 seconds, you take it off and you stick it on your front windscreen. The logic behind the pod, it's a accelerometer, which means that it senses G-forces, either forward or backward, meaning acceleration or braking, and cornering on the left to right. And it, based on those forces, whether going forward, backwards, left or right, it understands the aggressiveness of that movement. And based on the algorithm behind that, it gives you a rating on, a number of 0 to 100 on acceleration, on braking, and cornering. So if you're scoring 0, it means that you're really, really Niki Lauda. You really want to race to the destination. If you're scoring 100, it means that you're driving in the most efficient and the most basically controlled way, which, again, the closer you get to 100, the better the driving, the less aggressive, the less fuel consumption, and lastly, but most importantly, the less CO2 emissions you generate. Out of those 3 scores, as I said, you get it on your phone, you get the 3 scores, but also you get an overall score. So I don't know if you can see it here clearly in your screen, but you have a score for acceleration, a score for braking, and a score for cornering. And overall, the algorithm combines these 3 to give you an overall score for your trip. And what is important is, after each individual trip, this basically gets recorded and you see every single trip individually scored. And it gives you a real-time reinforcement of you did good or not so good. But I think there is an added benefit here. The added benefit is what I call gamification. And it's in the app itself, there is one more point of information, and it says ranking 3 out of 14, which what that means is you are the third best drivers out of the 14 cars in the fleet. It could be 100 cars, it could be 200 cars, it could be 2 cars. But it gives you a ranking in terms of your driving capabilities or skills. And as I said at the beginning, this is extremely powerful. Just for your information, all of business leases around Europe have installed Save Drive Pod. And I can tell you that, on a daily basis, people are fighting for the #1 spot. But again, it's a great sort of mental game, which ultimately results in great results in terms of driving better, driving safer, slower, more efficiently, and lowering your CO2. On the flip side, the administrator has a sort of the ability to have a full overview of the drivers. Again, overview means the individual scores, never the location. He has a little bit of the ability to change, delete, edit the drivers. You can see the individual scores, and is the only one to be able to see the positions of every single driver, because each individual driver just knows what position he or she is in. So meaning in this example, I am number 3 out of 14. I don't know who's number 2. I don't know who's number 1. But it basically drives me also to find out who has, the first positions, because again, human nature has it that we always want to basically be better than the other person, which is great in this circumstance. The results that can be generated out of good driving is stunning. This was a research done on, sort of from a university tracking people's behavior, driving behavior. And you will see there is a huge potential saving in an urban environment where understandably cars start, stop. You need to accelerate, decelerate. There's a lot more in and out, and people would instinctively think, I need to keep up with the traffic. I cannot drive in a safer or in a much more economical way. You'll be surprised how you can, with Safe Drive Pod in Romania as well. We know from our colleagues in Business Lease that they've seen a huge opportunity of improving even in your crazy traffic situation. So there are ways to improve, both economically and environmentally. So I just want to point out here the statistic within the urban environment. It clearly shows you that you can deliver up to 30% of fuel saving. And by the way, 30% fuel saving automatically means 30% of CO2 reduction, which is incredible. I'm not promising that you guys will have 30%, but what I'm saying is it is possible to achieve those numbers. Obviously, in motorways, when the car is much more, let's say, in a momentum, the savings are potentially less. But even there, you have opportunity to go anywhere from 3 to 4%. So in combination, you get 10, 15% of reduction, depending on how much you use urban or how much you drive in urban environment versus the motorway environment. As I said, it's super simple to install. You receive, for the user, receives a password via email, downloads the app. He installs the app with the password he's received through the email, and he connects the pod via Bluetooth, and he's good to go. It takes you literally not more than 5 to 7 minutes to do all those activities. The administrator has very little to do. He really basically receives the login, his or her logins as an administrator. He can upload all the users using an Excel sheet, and then he has full visibility of everybody that is in the network or in the Safe Drive Pod network. So the beauty in this system is its simplicity, its ease of use, and the beauty is that you can make without exaggeration, 10 minutes, you can be up and running and operational. Driver training, as I said, yes.
Sorry, we have a question and I feel it's necessary to have it here.
Yes.
Can the dashboard drivers app differentiate between different drivers on the same car?
Excellent question. Yes, they can, because the pod links with the specific phone. So every time you walk into the car, the pod will recognize your phone and will connect for that, that drive only. If, for example, another driver comes in a day later or an hour later, again, the pod recognizes the other phone and connects with that phone. So let's say the first trip with the first driver is recorded on the first driver's phone. And then the second trip with a second driver is recorded on the second driver's phone, and they do not mix. So if you have a pool car, it's also possible to use it. And every driver will be assigned their own individual trips.
Thank you.
So as far as driving, let's say, training is concerned, it really is, as I mentioned it before, it's about, understanding and really sort of refreshing, if you want, how to properly drive, not only because of technologically advanced cars. And, I think everybody before the lesson or before the training thinks that we know perfectly our car. You will always discover things that the car is able to do after the training, because technology, and very often we are not even conscious of a lot of technical or technological improvements the car has, and how to fully leverage them in terms of driving fuel efficiency and CO2 efficiency down. And as I said, it's a combination of theory and practice. I think this combination is perfect, because theory without practice is, it's only theory. And it reinforces the elements or the information you received in the morning. And it's done in such a way in order to minimize the time required from the employees. So what we've done in the past is we have a combined session, 2 to 3 hours lesson, and then individually the driver, goes out with the coach, the driving coach, on an assigned specific time basis. So it streamlines, or it uses time the most efficiently possible. Lastly, I'm not going to cover too long on carbon credits. We've joined, as I said, we measure, we reduce through Safe Drive Pod or driving lessons, and then whatever is remaining, we can offset in order really to achieve carbon neutrality. We've partnered up with Golden Standard, which is really one of the very best and most trusted carbon offset partner. It is a partner that was set up by the Worldwide Fund back in 2003. They have a list of projects around the world that basically contribute to carbon offsetting. And how it works is, once we calculate, through the dashboard, we're able to calculate how much you will be able to reduce your CO2 by. And if you wish to go carbon neutral, we can basically offset that those remaining CO2 tons. And every time you you buy or you purchase carbon credits, you will receive a carbon credit certificate, such as this one, as you see. clearly stating the company, or how many carbon credits have been removed from the database and to who they're attributed to. Now, these carbon credits are absolutely verified emission reduction credits, and they are, there is a tracking behind it. I don't know if you can see it again at the very, very bottom. There is a general database when, if you click on this specific number, you can trace back exactly, the removal of those carbon credits from the general database that this organization holds. These, by the way, are critical because more and more either partners or customers require you to prove that you are actually not just talking about, doing or your carbon neutrality, but here you have a living, tangible proof that you've actually executed on what you're saying. I hear you. I'm sure this question, has come up in the back of your mind. Why should I bother with, carbon credits, or let's say the GoBetter program, and not just go and buy carbon credits? You can. I'm going to be completely transparent. You can. But let me start with the negatives of just going out and buying carbon credits. I'm sure you've heard of the term greenwashing. And it's about, saying you're doing all these things, you're environmentally conscious, you're doing this, you're doing that. And ultimately, what you're doing is you're just buying carbon credits. The media, maybe 10 years ago, this was a great great solution. Today, it's the worst solution ever. The media will very, very quickly understand, not only the media, but your partners, your stakeholders, we very quickly understand that it's all, excuse my language, blah, blah. Because if you don't have any activities behind it, if you do not have any sort of programs to actually reduce and try actively and proactively to reduce your CO2, buying carbon credits, I would say, is the absolute worst you can do, because it really is, it's a time bomb. The other, let's say, minor, I think, minor element, but it is quite an element, is the fact that you do not involve your employees in it. It's a straight transaction, meaning I calculated my CO2, it's 100 tons, I'll buy 100 tons of carbon credits, and voila. The problem with that is that there is zero involvement from your employees, zero engagement from your employees, and your employees themselves will actually see the disconnect between what you as a company say about your sustainability activities and what you do. And that disconnect is not a healthy disconnect, because it doesn't create anything, it doesn't engage them in any way. And from a long-term perspective, they're completely disconnected in terms of your sustainability efforts. On the flip side, I think GoBetter obviously has benefits. I think the biggest benefit I can say is it has a behavioral benefit. These reduction activities, whether it's the driving course or the Safe Drive Pod, is a continual reinforcement of positiveness and of trying to do something good. And especially the Safe Drive Pod, after every trip, you get a reinforcement, not only of a feel-good element, but also from a personal perspective that, you learn how to be safer on the roads. You do learn how to actually sort of drive, I would actually dare to say, better, more efficiently on the road. So it is, what I'm trying to say is, it is a behavioral change, but that is more importantly sustainable, because it's ongoing. It is a sustainable movement, and more importantly, it involves every single employee within your car fleet. And obviously, if you want to offer it beyond your car fleet to your employees, it's also possible. It really is a major company move. As a wrap up, so GoBetter, we create this overall dashboard. There are lots of numbers, lots of colors, But realistically is we have one section, which is the measure section. I'm not going to go into the details of each one. As I said, analyzes, looks at the composition of the fleet, the potential CO2 generation over a year, over the lease, the life of the lease. Then we go into a section 2 where it's all the activities about reducing, how much you can reduce of CO2 depending on the activities you do. And thirdly is once you've reduced, can you offset and what the offset costs would be. So we can present you this full overview, to really understand where you are, but where you can be as well in terms of reduction. And by the way, this is the measure, because we have all the data, we are able to do it very, very quickly. So on very, very quickly, let's have a look at how quickly is quickly. So as I said, CO2 analysis, which is the ground zero, first step is, CO2 analysis. It's immediate. I would dare to say it's at a touch of a button from our side. Again, thankfully, because we have all the data for all the fleets, for all your fleets, we're able actually to compute it, the algorithm, all the data has been inputted into sort of the algorithm or the dashboard that we've created. And it's at a touch of a button, we're able to actually calculate the output. Now, having said that, if you're interested as an external partner or as a non-customer of ours, we can sit down and look at how we can import your fleet data and review if we can actually basically give you an overview of your CO2 as well. Driving training, again, it's something that we can organize quite quickly. We have partners in every single country, in Romania as well. We are able to actually organize and pull this together very, very quickly. Whether it's within 5 days, but what I'm trying to say is how quickly are you as a customer or a client able to mobilize your drivers and get them together is how fast we are able to respond and train your drivers. Even faster is the Safe Drive Pod installation. You saw it for yourself. Once you have the Safe Drive Pod, you have the physical Safe Drive Pod, uploading the list of drivers, setting up the system, and getting all those drivers uploaded and actionable is extremely quick. The installation of the pod is extremely quick. So therefore, again, within 2-3 days, we can get you guys up and running with, let's say, the Safe Drive Pod. And the beauty with the Safe Drive Pod is immediate feedback from, the moment you install the system. It's exact the next trip, you are actually basically already measuring your driving behavior. Lastly, carbon offsets. It is lastly because we need to do the fleet analysis. We need to understand which of the packages you've actually chosen, whether it's only driving training or only Safe Drive Pod. But depending on the combination of that, we are able to calculate what to offset at the end. And obviously, the purchase of those carbon offset is quick, but we need nevertheless to make all those changes before. So more importantly, what I'm trying to say is that we have the possibility of creating a fleet that is carbon neutral within a week. Yes, I'm stretching it, whether it's 10 days, 14 days, but it is extremely quickly. And if you flick back to one of my very first slides, really for companies to start concerning or acting on reducing their CO2 of their fleet, any fleet migration, any operational changes, all that takes immense amount of time and immense amount of money. This is a solution that gets you, let's say, going or activates your CO2 reduction activities over 1 or 2 weeks. And I dare to say that I think we are the only ones in the market that gives you this combination of measurement, reduction, and offset to really help you guys reduce and achieve your sustainability targets. I think it's quite obvious that GoBetter is a sustainability exercise. It is not sort of, the aim is really not to, how much can I save? But, obviously, I'm sure everybody in the background has thought to themselves, okay, so this project is, or this service is available. How much is it going to cost me to reduce, or is it cost effective to engage in this service, and then in order to actually reduce my CO2? Just for argument's sake, I did a quick calculation and exercise, and it's very theoretical, but it gives you an indication of what the potentials are. So again, I've taken a very, very rough example of assuming a 30,000 kilometer, 36-month lease, 10,000 kilometers per year, 7.5 liters per 100 consumption. Blah, if you work through the numbers, you will spend about 1,200 euros per year on fuel, assuming these parameters. We are able, with the Ultra, to generate about 14-15% savings, which gives you about 170 euro per car saving. Net, it equates to about 14 euros per month saving on fuel and fuel alone. And by the way, I am completely ignoring the fact that you may actually have a damage ratio, lower damage ratio, less, let's say, every time there's a damage or an accident, you have sort of downtime, you have external costs, you have additional insurance costs. So all that aside, I'm just purely looking at the fuel savings. On the flip side, GoBetter, the same amount of parameters, 30,000 kilometers, 36 months. I've taken sort of the Ultra, as I call it, the Rolls-Royce of the GoBetter. It comes out to about 7 euros per month, plus roughly about 4 euros per carbon credit. Again, these are just numbers, orientation numbers. But what I want you to focus on is that GoBetter, with the carbon credits, to become carbon neutral, is actually cheaper, or it's paid off fundamentally by the benefit it gives to every single driver. The 2, 3, 4, 5 euros savings, not cost, savings you generate on every single car, far outweighs, let's say, or I should say, the sustainable benefits of that far outweighs the cost of the program itself. And again, I haven't even taken sort of the accident ratios, the downtime, and let's not forget the qualitative aspect of engaging with your employees as well on a good cause. So yes, GoBetter is a sustainability exercise, but what I say is it will not break the bank either. I don't know if you have a similar expression in Romanian, but what I'm trying to say is it will not cost you an immense amount of money in order to engage and to do something good, not only for the environment, but good also from a morale of people, good also from a business sense in terms vis-a-vis your stakeholders as well. So to round this up, I think GoBetter has multiple benefits. We understand your fleet's CO2 level. We have all their data. Clear benefit is we are improving and in your skills, your driver's skills, in order to increase their safety and on the roads. We are lowering potentially accidents, and which means lower downtime, lower admin cost. We are, implementing long-term behavioral benefits on your employees, which means that on every trip that they make, they already instinctively think of how to drive better, safer, more economically, and more efficiently. We are helping your metrics in terms of CO2 reporting metrics and sustainability efforts in order to reduce your company's CO2 level. And I think ultimately it also helps your brand image and your brand reputation as, participating in reducing or improving the overall ESG efforts that we as companies are receiving from an external environment. So all in all, yes, we're getting external pressures from all around us, but there are ways to act and act quickly, and those ways are affordable and ultimately generate benefits at the end of the day. Thank you very much for your attention. I think I am within my time, 5-10 minutes, maybe overtime. I'm happy to take any questions if you have. Obviously, it goes without saying, if you're interested, please, come back to your contact at Business Lease. We would be more than happy to look at and answer any of your questions, concerns, queries. We can look at doing an analysis of your CO2 levels and how we can help you reduce them. Basically, we're here to help you transition into a more sustainable future.
I have some questions in the chat, so I will read them. Can you share with us your initiatives and projects aimed at reducing environmental impact?
In terms of Business Lease or in terms of?
I think in terms of Business Lease, yeah.
Okay, so it's a very good question, because before we put this GoBetter program together, one main thing was actually to prove it to ourselves whether to walk the talk, as they say. And as I said, all the subsidiaries as of late last year have already gone through this program themselves. All our internal fleets have already been installed with Safe Drive Pod. All our internal drivers have already gone through the driving training themselves. And we are seeing the positive results. The anecdotes that I was saying about the competitiveness of our drivers is not anecdotal. It is real time. I'm sure if you reach out to my Romanian colleagues, they will tell you, internally how they're competing against each other to get to that, number one driving position. So we are talking or walking the talk. I don't know if that answered the.
Unfortunately, Claudio is no longer with us, but
Okay.
I hope he will see the recording and he will have his answer.
Okay.
One more question here. What steps are you taking to comply with current and upcoming environmental regulations?
Okay. We have internally also, we are measuring our scope 1, scope 2, and we have just begun also measuring our scope 3 outputs, or CO2 outputs, emission levels. And we've internally basically set ourselves some targets. For example, scope 1, most of our subsidiaries are carbon neutral, meaning, again, thanks to GoBetter, we've activated all the possible reduction activities and bought off our carbon credits. Scope 2, we are working with our scope 2, by the way, is all the electricity and external energy providers, meaning primarily for big companies is the electricity, the heating, the air conditioning that of their business or office buildings. So we are working with our real estate partner, meaning our office partner, to see if there are ways to reduce or reduce the electricity consumption, whether it's improving the lighting system, lower wattage lighting or different technology lighting, or more efficient, let's say, heating and cooling of the buildings. Very often, for example, in locations where we're looking at moving premises, the major criteria is always the efficiency of the buildings in terms of energy consumption. So that's a mandate that we have put together. Scope 3 is considerably more difficult because it's a little bit out of our control, but we do have a procurement policy where with our suppliers, we are mandating or we are requesting our suppliers to abide by some sort of sustainability metrics that we have put forth together. And this is, we're slowly rolling this out across the full region.
Okay. And one more question in the chat. How do you track progress toward your carbon reduction goals? Are there specific metrics or KPIs that you monitor regularly?
Excellent question. Yes, we track them. It depends on the word regularly, but sort of a scope 1 is easy to track thanks to our GoBetter dashboard. So we have very, very quick and I dare say real-time visibility. So there it's easy because we have the data. Scope 2 is we track every basically 6 months or quarterly, depending on how frequently we receive invoices on consumption. Scope 3 is a much longer term element. On a yearly basis, we review the initiatives and the activities that our core suppliers have done. Obviously, we give more weight to the bigger suppliers versus the smaller suppliers. By this, over time, will basically trickle down, because the bigger suppliers have the capacity, have the know-how, have the manpower to also track and report. But slowly we're seeing this will be trickling down to smaller and smaller suppliers as well. And within 2 or 3 years, I'm hopeful that most companies will have an internal system to track also and to measure, so that the visibility is traceable across suppliers and clients.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions. Unless anyone here with us wants to ask something else. No questions. I let Juana take the floor for the ending.
Yeah, thank you very much, Diamantis. Always a pleasure having you with us. In a constantly changing world, it's essential to explore and adopt solutions that reduce environment impact, promote greener mobility. And we believe that this is the first and fastest steps into this direction. So I trust you all that you gain some new information and this subject is important to you. Of course, we will continue to send you more information on this topic. We will share also the registration with the webinar. And in case you have questions or you like to try the program, you can address to your account manager, or you can send us an email to vânzări@businesslist.ro. We will write also the email address in the chat box. If there are really no other questions, we can end this webinar. And again, thank you, Diamantis, and thank you all for participating.
Thank you.